Hello, AP Worlders. Welcome to your intro to the Foundations era. Alright, this will be an overview. This is part of your summer assignment, your first summer assignment. Paleolithic means Old Stone Age. The Paleolithic era represents over 95% of the time that human beings have inhabited the earth, but only 12% of people to ever live on earth lived during this time. Alright, so think about that. 95% of the time that humans have actually been on earth, but only 12% of the humans to ever live on earth lived during this time. Alright, and so there's a good timeline to show you to look at the different groups. Alright, we're going to talk about the Neolithic era of this soon. Early humans were mobile and creative in adapting to different geographical settings. These hunting foraging bands of humans gradually migrated, starting in Africa, going to Eurasia, Australia, and the Americas. Alright, so started, here in the Africas. You can see, follow the arrows to see how they migrated. These early humans lived in small groups, 25 to 50 people, and were egalitarian, which is here. All people, or what egalitarian means, all people were even in the group. Women gathered, which made up the majority of the diet, and men hunted. Decisions were made by the oldest member because these bands were kinship groups. Kinship means family groups. Some groups of these hunters and foragers adapted to the environment and became settled, agricultural people. We will discuss this group in detail later, but first we'll discuss the second group, which were known as the pastoralists. There is also a third group that remained as hunters and foragers, but we're going to focus on the pastoralists now. Alright, and pastoralists are people who make their living by tending herds of large animals. By tending herds of large animals. They would move to new lands for their animals to graze on. Due to this mobility, they didn't have large amounts of possessions. The migration these pastoralists did led to technological changes as they interacted with the settled agricultural communities. Pastoralists also led to increased economic exchanges, facilitating trade. Alright, so the pastoralists, as they moved place to place, they would facilitate or enable this trade. Pastoralists were often the developers and disseminators of new weapons and modes of transportation that would transform warfare for the agricultural civilizations. Example would be iron weapons and horseback riding. The pastoralists would invent that. Due to migration, pastoral societies were smaller than settled agricultural societies, but needed protection, so often but they needed the protection. So that's why they led to development in different warfare weapons and techniques. The agricultural societies would learn from these pastoralists and steal their techniques. The relationship between the pastoralists and agricultural societies was mainly one of conflict. Pastoral people were attracted to the wealth and sophistication of the agricultural societies, and they sought access to their lands, crops, and manufactured products. Here's a look at some more pastoralists. Okay, now to discuss the first group from earlier, the agricultural societies. About 5,000 years ago, urban societies developed, basically cities or civilization. These urban societies developed due to the Neolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution was the beginning of farming. These urban societies began farming, and this farming created a surplus of food and resources. And because they had this surplus of resources, people were able to do different activities or jobs. This is known as specialization. Some examples of specialization would be like soldiers or blacksmiths or priests. These areas are the areas of the main urban societies that we'll discuss. You see, we have China, Indus, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Shavan, and Olmecs. As populations grew, competition for surplus resources led to greater social stratification or social classes. Those in control of the surplus were high upper social class people. The competition for surplus also led to increased trade amongst urban societies. It also led to more complex governments in these societies and religious systems and record keeping. Alright, so here would be some examples. This is an example of record keeping, right? Cuneiform by the Mesopotamians. But as civilizations expanded, the need for more resources led to environmental concerns. Finally, the accumulation of wealth spurred warfare between communities. This violence drove the development of new technologies of war and urban defense. These societies had some similarities, such as agricultural surplus. Other similarities include creations of cities and complex institutions, including political bureaucracies. Alright, bureaucracies is when you kind of divide up the jobs in the government, the roles of the government. So our country would be an example of a bureaucracy. They also had stratified social hierarchies, alright, meaning that there's a group at the top, a group in the middle, and a group at the bottom. So that's the hierarchy. And organized long-distance trade relationships. Most of these societies were patriarchal, meaning they were male-dominant societies. Culture played a significant role in unifying the states. Alright, so they would share culture with shared like laws, language, literature, religion, art, and that shared culture would unite the people to be able to live together. Here's another look at those river valley civilizations that I showed you from that first map. We have Mesopotamia, which is here, which was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Alright, there were two main groups to live there. The first were the Sumerians and then the Babylonians. Some inventions that they had was the cuneiform writing that I showed you earlier. Hammurabi's code. Hammurabi was a leader who wrote like a law code, and also the invention of the will. Next is Egypt, which is here, which was along the Nile River. The leader of Egypt was the pharaoh, who was also like the religious leader. They had a theocracy. They were polytheistic, meaning they believed in multiple gods, and they believed in an afterlife. And so they would mummify their leaders and build those large pyramids that you're probably familiar with to bury the leaders in those pyramids with riches that they could use in the afterlife. One monotheistic group would form in Egypt, and those were the Jewish people. They would be slaves there due to their being monotheistic. All right. Women in Egypt did have more rights, and they could be pharaohs. All right. They also invented the hieroglyphic style of writing. When we get to the religion unit, we'll talk more about the Jewish people in Egypt. Next, we have the Indus, which is here, the Indus River in India. And this was a collection of unified city-states. Harappa, which is here, and Mohenjo-Daro are two of these city-states. Historians still have not been able to decipher their writing. All right, then we also have the China out here with the Shang Dynasty, and they were along the Yellow River. They were a heavy patriarchal society, but they were good at producing bronze and silk. And then in the Western Hemisphere, we're going to have two other places of note. All right, we're going to have the Olmec, which was around here in Mexico, Central America area, and they were known for these large stone heads that they built. And they were also a collection of city-states that had a writing system and a calendar. And then last were the Chavín people, who were in the Andes Mountains along South America. There is no evidence of art or writing for them. But they did have a system of chords called quipu, which was used for accounting. These, so here's where the Chavín were, the Andes Mountains. But there was a big lasting impact of these river valley civilizations. All right, the monuments that are still around today are those large stone heads, the wheel, the use of horses, a writing system, a calendar, creating bureaucracies to divide up government. Around 1000 BCE, these civilizations started to decline, and most areas would rebuild during the classical era, some in different spots. China, however, would stay in the same spot. Alright, and so that's pretty much it for a quick overview of the Foundations era. And this will give you a good background. Alright. And stay tuned for the second summer reading or summer lecture, which is on the classical era.